and the no way I just saw what I saws, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
We're here.
All right. So do you want me to do the dates and names thing real quick, and then we'll dive into it?
Go for it. When we covered this on Three Beards podcast, I could not do the Russian names for the life of me. I was bombing on these things so bad. It was rough. It was rough, but yeah, no, that's good. That's good. This is going to be a good one.
I actually went out to some podcasts just to listen to the names, and hopefully I'll remember. But anyway, so this took place in 1959, and it took place. They were all there were actually 10 of them, but it wound up being 9, and there were 8 males and 2 females, and they were from Ural Polytechnic Institute. And it was interesting; they were all scientifically trained. Not only were they very good hikers and skiers, when they got back from this trip, they planned on they expected to get like a level 2 hiking certification. So it was part of it, but it was basically a ski trip, a way to blow off some steam from the Polytechnic Institute. They were engineers of different kinds, and one of them was studying economics, one was studying nuclear physics. And so Dyatlov Pass actually didn't exist prior to this. That was news to me. It was actually a name for the leader, the guy who set it up, the 23-year-old who set it up, Igor Dyatlov. And then everybody else was between 20 years old and 24 years old. So typical college students. And then there was a man who joined them kind of late, sort of mysterious. So this is one of the little mysteries that seems to be a dead end. But his name was Semyon Zolotarov, and he was 38 years old, so considerably older than them, a World War II veteran, and he was a hiking instructor. So here was another person that knew the terrain well, was going along with them.
And this little side note on this one, this is where a lot of the conspiracies come in on this case, is because they're like, all these are 20-year-olds. Everybody's down here is the same age. All of a sudden, here comes this old, like almost like the old creepy dude joining in on the hiking thing. So a lot of people are like, this is where the conspiracy is like the communist government. This was the spy. This was somebody that was brought in to watch over this group to make sure they were doing what they weren't supposed to, do and stuff like that. But this also leads into a lot of the other aspects where people always kind of do their deviations of, when you get into the aliens and military, and it's because of this man. This is one of the usually the linchpin for a lot of those cases.
And there was one very, very, very curious thing about him, which I'm going to save because it didn't happen till years later, some follow-up investigations. But anyway, so the other people, because I think it's important to honor the names of the dead: Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubinina, Yuri Krivenchenko, Alexander Kolotov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin, and also Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, who that actually sounds French, although Nikolai isn't. So very, very interesting. There was also one other person that when they reached the base camp, he was not feeling well, and so he turned back and returned and was spared, and his name was Yuri Yudin. So there you are, comrade, names of all Russian hikers.
Yes.
Like I said, they were all experienced. So January 23rd, 1959, they depart from Sverdlov, which is now Yekaterinburg, for the Otorten Mountain. Again, they're going to ski. Nothing nefarious, nothing complicated. Craig, for some reason, this was something that's come on my radar over the past decade or so, and I thought that they were doing like science experiments, but no, they were engineering students, but they're just out for a good time. 4 days later, after traveling by bus, train, and some hiking, they reached their base camp. That's January 27th. The next day, Yuri Yudin turns back due to illness. 3 days after that, they're hiking their way to the mountain that they want to climb. So they store food for their return trip. Everything's going well, but they endure some poor weather. They encounter poor weather. I mean, they're up in the mountains. Anybody who's gone skiing, that's part of the whole thing. You can't ski without snow. And then the incident actually unfolds overnight, February 1st, 2nd. An interesting thing that, all of these things, Craig, they're like a snowball rolling downhill. They happen to be on Kholat Syakhl, which is known as Dead Mountain. So that feeds. People go, oh my gosh, they were on Dead Mountain. So it wasn't until about 2.5 weeks later, because they had to go, they had to do their thing, they had to come back. Nobody was rightfully expecting them until maybe the 10th, the 12th. I believe that Dyatlov had said that he would contact someone by the 12th. So why they wait until the 20th is a little unclear, but everybody gets involved. The families get very insistent. I have this picture of like the Russian bureaucracy and the parents like, we have to move on this. So the civilians and the military go out. February 26, 1959, the campsite then is discovered by a search party. So about a month later, they start collecting their clues. You wanna pick up with some of the anomalies that they found and what they found?
Well, I mean, one of the things too, just like for a lot of people, it's like, I know we had to gloss over quick, but this was supposed to have just been, everybody's getting, like you said, certified for, they basically get up their rating for hiking. These guys were all avid back, hiking, going out in the mountains. From the beginning, this mishaps just kept happening. Everything from bad weather to just Yuri getting sick. I mean, just things one after another, just misfortunes kept happening that actually put them to where, had some of these things not occurred, there's actually a good chance that we wouldn't even be talking about this story. This would have been 10 people, went up for a hiking trip, came back down, nothing happened. But because of the delays, it actually put them in this path to where they ended up in this weather aspect. And that's so I mean, I don't know how much into the thing that you want to go to, just break it down to what the claim, like what they've had, because they say that 6 of the members died from hypothermia.
Yeah,
and three were fatal injuries.
Yeah, let's slow down a little. So when they discovered the campsite, they found a couple of things. They found the tent partially collapsed. Of course, snow will do that. It's been a month. But it was cut from the inside. So it was the first thing that they found odd. So they cut themselves out of the tent. And then there are footprints accounting for about all 9 people leading toward where the bodies were found, which is a little less than a mile away, 1,500 meters, little less than a mile. What was interesting to me, Craig, though, is, when you start talking about the theories, which it will, this even though they cut themselves out, the footprints did not indicate running. They indicated that everybody was evacuating the tent in an orderly fashion, which was interesting.
And that's the thing, is the theory that one of the theories of why they would cut themselves out is that the camp stove that they brought along, caused, like, there was smoke inside there, and so they kind of panicked. Well, these are experienced people that have used this equipment. This isn't the first time they've ever used this equipment, so they're going to be used to smoke building up inside of a tent. They're not going to have this. So obviously there wasn't this chaotic, disoriented fleeing, because just like you said, there was an organized leaving of this, of this thing. So, and this is where, once again, you get some of the other aliens, you get the paranormal, the paranormal aspects that come in, because they're able to jump on this. This is a key fact, that these two things don't jive, that there was something horrendous was happening inside the tent, that they had to flee. But yet when you see the aftermath, like you said, there's no fleeing. It's an organized progression. Like, they're actually leaving like they should.
Right. So the stove, my understanding, and what clutters all of this up is the Russian investigation was very abruptly shut down. And a lot of the information that we have comes from the reports of the people, and it was all put top secret. like, or whatever the Russian version is. It was archived as secret. The files were sealed. My understanding is that when the leader of the investigation shut it down March 28th, another investigatory team was on its way to the site, and they said, no, you're not going. So these are just little, I think of things like Montauk and all, little things that muddy the waters. So Lori asked, without shoes, correct? Well, yeah, which was also weird. They were in various states of undress. Some were in their underwear. But keep in mind, the tent is sealed, and they have this stove. Now, my understanding, Craig, of the stove, or at least one person was trying to push forth that the stove was of one of their own design. Maybe it wasn't, because there are some photos prior to the event where there's some burns on some of the clothes, and it's something that's part of the investigation. There were some burns, which lead into the nefarious explanations.
Yes.
Right. But it could simply be that some sparks flew, or someone.
Well, that's the thing, is it could have been that's what led to it. But the weird part is the cutting out of the tent, because there isn't like a map anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember from reading this, there was no indication of a widespread fire in any of the tent area. So that would not lead experienced hikers to flee the tent. So even if it was a spark, so if there's smoke, everybody that's done this thing, they would know. Anybody that's camped like this, and when you have any type of heat source like a wood stove or something inside of a tent, it's ingrained in you. You don't stand up, because that's everything. It raises it, so you stay low. Anybody, like a house fire, everybody knows you go low and you get out. So they would know this part. So that's one of the things. So that's part of the mystery is, okay, if they did cut themselves out and they left in different states like this without shoes, like they're fleeing, when did the panic start that would cause this? What caused the panic? And that's the part that's one of the mysteries that I don't know if anybody's ever really come up with a great answer on that.
No, I'm going to say this, and I didn't think of this before necessarily as I was prepping. There is no real evidence of panic, only aberrant behavior.
Just the cutting, which is
distinction there, right? The cutting out. Plus, it was minus 13 to 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people say it was as cold as minus 30. So I went to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, for an event in winter. I stepped outside at the intermission of the event to call Tanya, and it was minus 13 degrees, not wind chill. It was like legit minus 13 degrees. And I felt my brain freezing. Like it was a hard time, like within a couple of minutes, it was hard to put a sentence together. So if you double that and you have the winds off the mountain and all, which they believe played a part, the fact that they're in these varied states of undress, that leads to a panic. That leads to a hurry, but the footsteps don't. That's the thing. They don't match. That's what I said. No. What the tent and the footsteps leave two different things. I mean, you can explain the claw marks on the trees and the thing, because if you get to the point, if anybody's from the upper areas where it gets really cold, you understand when you get cold, there naturally your body start getting in this thing where I gotta hurry. Things get harder to do. So if they for however they got out to this thing and they start getting cold, the claw marks on the tree would make sense, because they would be climbing, either trying to get little branches to make a fire, do something. Yep. And so they're trying to pull at stuff. So that would be those injuries. And so that would account for the trees. I've never bought the one they're trying to climb the trees to escape something. No, or to see something that was coming.
Yeah.
Was another thing I read.
I've always been because I was a Cub Scout leader, and I've always known, it's just like I always taught them, it's like you've got to get dry, dead stuff, because that's what will actually help you make a fire quicker. It's like if you're struggling to make a fire, green stuff isn't going to do anything. Right. And so you're going to need the dead branches. And so there could have been somebody trying to climb, and that's and that's what, and like what Joseph was saying, that's part of the crazy thing. Is like, okay, they could have had a panic in the tent, but once they're outside of the tent, they're orderly steps. They weren't like fleeing. Right. It wasn't like they were running. It looked like an orderly hiking march, which is what an experienced hiker would do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it is. It didn't look like they fled in a hurry. Is what we're really saying. And then Charles asks, why did they not recover their gear from the tents? It looks like three of them started heading back and succumbed to hypothermia. We'll get to that. So they find two of the bodies almost straight away because they're by this tree that Craig was talking about. I was flabbergasted, man, doing the research and the tree branches, like Occam's razor. There's a little fire underneath the tree. You're not going to dig in the snow for branches. You're going to pull them off the tree.
You're going to climb the tree. You're probably going to, like, if you and me are out there, I'm going to try to push you, being the taller one, I'm going to try to shove you up as high as I can, trying to get you there. And that would indicate, as you're trying to claw at this frozen tree, that would give you injuries. That would, there'd be a lot of stuff that would happen. And that would explain why someone, like, in the different positions that some of these bodies are found, they were in the process of trying it. But once again, we don't know why they left the tent.
Right. That's the big one.
That's the
big sinister mystery. Yeah. And I'm not sure that we're going to get there, in the time we've allotted for this one. So they find two of them, Krivnashenko and Doroshenko. So the two Shenkos. They find shoeless, dressed only in their underwear. And then between the pine tree and the camp, so these are the three, Charles, that we think we're going back maybe to get some gear or get something to help, which would say, like, was there a crisis and the crisis passed, so they started to go back? But again, Craig, they're serious. They're damn it, experienced. So anyway, Dyatlov, Komogrova, and Slobodin, they find them. Now, all five of those that they found initially, they go hypothermia. And part of hypothermia is this paradoxical undressing. So as you're succumbing to hypothermia, suddenly your body is creating this sensation of heat.
You're
and
really hot.
People will take their clothes off. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe that's what happened. So no initial report of injuries or anything like that. But we're only accounting for 5 of the 9. It took until May 4th until some of the snow went away and some things happened. Yeah, some initial melt off that they found the last 4. And this is where it starts to get pretty crazy. It should be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, my colleague. They found the last 4 under 13 feet of snow. So a theory is that they may have dug out, trying to, kind of make a bit of a snow cave for insulation. Yeah,
make a snow cave, because that'd be a great way to keep warm. Yep.
Yeah, it may have collapsed upon them. 3 of them were dressed considerably more than the other 5 that were found. And I read somewhere that some of the clothes belonged to other people that they were wearing. So after some people succumbed, they may have taken some of their clothes and put it on for added warmth.
Right. Yeah, because one of the things, like, they said that the injuries that because one of the dispelled theories was that the indigenous people, Mansi people, attacked them in the stuff. That was one. The injuries that they said could not have been, because there's no soft tissue things. Well, it could have been, like you said, they could have, in a hasty thing to make a cave, it could have collapsed.
Yeah.
And if the weight of that could have been enough to cause that blunt force, and it wouldn't create a soft tissue injury. It would just be because it's the same thing. It's ice falling on, huge block of ice falling on you.
Right.
But once again, we always just keep coming back to this thing where it's just, there's no, it's a sense of, there's the evidence points to order and chaos. And every time the tent, the things are right here. It's just, you're looking at, even in that state, it's like, so in the tent, were they starting to, carbon monoxide? I mean, was it something like that? And it caused them to start to, like a delirium, and they started to go crazy, and that and that's what caused these things? Or is it just and that's, I mean, I don't fault people for, jumping to the extreme, because when, especially, like I said, if you start going stuff, wouldn't it make more sense? Like, it's an alien weapon. It's a military exercise that caused the soft, caused the blunt force damage, and not the soft. It makes it easier to explain that. But the problem is, One, if you believe the Russian government, Soviet Union at the time, they don't claim any tests during that time. I mean, yes, they were covering this stuff up, which would lead to, something else was going on. But one of the ones too, it's like the we talked a little bit before the show. One of the ones had radiation on the clothing. A lot of people say, well, see, that shows like a test. He worked in a nuclear facility. So all of his gear, would register on a Geiger counter. It wouldn't matter. He was, so everybody else around him, anybody that was in close proximity to him, would have residual radiation on them as well.
Yeah.
And that explains that right away. I mean, it's just he worked at a facility, and we all, from a previous show, we know all how well, like City 40, we all know how well Russian, protocol was towards radiation.
Right. And really, although they identified 3 pieces of clothes, 2 were barely within the parameters of what you expect about decomposition per minute. So, so you mentioned the soft tissue several times. So 2 of them had skull fractures. 2 of them had blunt force chest trauma, massive internal bleeding, no external wounds. And one of the doctors reported in one of the Russian reports that it was pressure consistent with a car crash. So it could have been that snow impact, certainly. Now,
could have been falling out of a tree.
Yeah. Well, all 4 of them probably didn't fall out of a tree, though.
Yeah, like I said, like the one, like I said, I think it wasn't just one, or did they say all of them had like the blunt force of a
car crash? 4 that were found under the 13 feet of snow. Yeah, which obviously a correlation there. None of the others did. The first 5 hypothermia is pretty much, cut and dry. So out of those 4 that were found, though, Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips, as well as some facial tissue and a fragment of her skull bone. The 38-year-old Zoloratov had his eyeballs missing, and Kolovatov had his eyebrows missing. Could have been animals. That's one theory.
Scavengers,
but they were also found in a running, partially melted stream of water. And the water over the course of a month, from what I understand, could have dissolved the eyes. I don't know about the tongue. And it's interesting because a lot of researchers downplay the tongue. I don't think the tongue is going to dissolve, but maybe it's the tongue is odd to me. Also,
I'd be more a believer like scavengers, like birds coming along, pecking out the eyes, pecking out the tongue, because that would be easy, like the lips and stuff. Yeah, that would be that type of stuff that they can peck away.
Kolatev's eyebrows, though, kind of.
I know that's one of the ones. Maybe he had maybe it was a shaving accident in one of the previous ones, and he accidentally shaved his eyebrow off.
Yeah,
or as a prank,
Yeah, I was going to say he was emulating Pink from Pink Floyd, but
he was pranked by one of his fellow hikers, and and so that's how come he had his no eyebrows. That it was already that way.
Yeah,
we don't know.
They all died within 6 to 8 hours of their last meal, but they probably died sooner than that from minus 30 degrees in your underwear. You're just not going to last very long at all. So I want to address a couple things in the chat room. Of the indigenous people, right? So they're the Mansi, as Craig said, reindeer herders. But there was no evidence, only hikers' prints and the nature of the wounds. They had no reason to attack them, to defend that land. There are lots of people who go back and forth through this area. It wasn't so remote. When we talk about the avalanche thing, it's quite astonishing, actually, how many people have been through there. Let's see here. What else was I going to say? Oh, right. Charles had said
about the avalanche.
Yeah. After being awakened by a snowshoe sled. I have watched the simulations. I watched more of them this morning. Where the tent was positioned on the lip, where the mountain was, it just doesn't make sense to me. There's an alternative from the slab avalanche that does makes sense to me, and it could count for some other things. But anyway, so they do the initial investigation. May 28th, a month after the last bodies are found, it's shut down. Another investigation that was about to go out is shut down, and all the files are kept secret. That seems strange to me, Craig,
Mhm.
because if it was simply a weather event, it's a cautionary tale, but it's nothing that you have to keep the file secret. So that's
I mean,
weird.
seeing that's one of the things, like, I think why this mystery has always had such a hold for a lot of people is just because it's like what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Because, okay, you can see if there was an avalanche, anybody that's been up in the mountains, you can hear that, and it has a distinctive sound. So if you're an experienced hiker, you're like, that could be something that you wake up in a panic. You got to get out. You got to experience, and there may have been some snow shifting somewhere, and that could explain why everybody was like, "All right, guys, we've got to get to the tree line. We got to get out of
But you
this
don't
open."
cut your tent that you may
Yeah,
need
and
once the crisis
that's the thing.
passed.
Once again, why'd they cut the tent? Why aren't they wearing clothes? All these things don't make sense, because if it was something, because the orderly fashion that they left the tent doesn't explain the evidence of a panic. They don't work together. There's two things. It's like two different groups were involved in this thing, and you can't. For me, that's always been the big mystery. What happened in the tent, and what happened when they got out of the tent? Because there's two different types of people.
Right. So before we get into, and we'll move quickly through them because there really isn't any basis for any of them. Zolotaryov, the 38-year-old World War II vet, they did some testing on his body after the fact, dude, and his DNA did not match the family records.
Yeah.
So that dude was not who he said he was.
And that's where when I first talked, that's when that comes into play, is because he's like a secret agent man, that's, why is a 38-year-old hanging out with early 20-year-olds? There's something that doesn't match. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, it's like a mystery after, I mean, that's why it works good for us. It's a sinister mystery. Yeah. That's why it worked good. Yeah.
but I mean, for 9 hikers from the Polytechnic Institute, you send a spy. There's Russian state paranoia, and then there's
they were worried about people going to the bakery, at different hours. I mean, like I said, so this one would be it wouldn't be within realms of doing this thing, especially if there was no military facilities around there. So it wouldn't be without the realm possibility that they would send somebody as a handler to ensure that they didn't go where they weren't supposed to go. But in all the evidence from their trip, there's no evidence that he was ever steering them in a different direction. It was basically, for lack of better terms, he was the old dude at the skate palace that was hanging out with the kids rolling around in the roller rink.
Yeah.
It was like he was just hanging out, and going along with the thing. It's like there never seemed to be like a nefarious side that I could find, that he was doing something. Because even all the photos, everybody was hanging. It's like there wasn't like, hey, look at that creepy guy off in the corner that's never hanging out with the group. They were all, it was a mesh group. I mean, they were devastated when Yuri had to leave. Yeah, that's.
And
the cigarette guy.
He died with them. It's not like he was mysteriously airlifted and managed to survive, and they found him in some kind of MacGyver, situation. Not like that. So 2019, the investigation results are presented in July 2020 that it was an avalanche. That was a likely cause. Some people just said, okay, that's good. That's it. Then there was the 2021 science report of the slab avalanche that was consistent with the injuries. But all of the simulations show the slab avalanche hitting the tent. My question is, if it hit the tent and they sustain these blunt force injuries, 4 of them, why are they the furthest away from the tent? Like, you wouldn't carry these 4 people with partially crushed skulls and crushed chests, internally bleeding. You wouldn't carry them a mile. And there was no evidence of them being carried.
And they wouldn't be able to move themselves.
No,
because they would have been the first ones found, and then the other people at that point, like if I'm trying to save somebody, I'm going to try, and then eventually when I can't, boom, you're going to find that person, and now you're going to find me later on. This was once again completely opposite, and that's why I said I've never bought it. It's like it's still the avalanche thing. It would never explain why the tent was cut from the inside. The stuff that all the damage came from inside the tent. It was never anything like got pushed through. Everything was outward. So I don't know.
There's one theory, and it came after the avalanches, from a group of guys who went out there to the exact day 50 years later. And they discovered something called a katabatic wind. So the wind comes off the mountain almost at hurricane force. And one of the interesting things about the way this wind moves is it creates an infrasound. And infrasound, we know from pulse weapons and from Havana syndrome and all these kinds of things, infrasound can cause panic, disorientation. So, Craig, I can't say if someone said to me, pick something, I think that I sit right now today with the katabatic wind, creating an infrasound that caused some disorientation.
Yeah, I can see, because one of those things too, would it be possible that would cause, initially, like we're sleeping in our tent, boom, we hit that, it induces that panic, and you panic to get out of the tent, but then that cold hits you and snaps you out of it, and then everybody orderly fashion, and that might explain why they're in different states of undress.
Yep.
Is because they got to that point and then they realized, okay, guys, this isn't anything. Now we have to survive. And then that's when you had your orderly progression. I mean, that could be, I do agree. I think that's probably one of the most likelihood. I mean, because it's like Ron had said and stuff too. It's about military. They stumped, King was like, they went across like military. That's been one of the really romance things, like, because it's cool. It's sexy. It's, you got to have that, you've got to have the big, the military, black helicopter, you got to have that stuff. But it doesn't, there's nothing that would indicate anything that would be like an actual, like from a weapon, from something like this. It's just, it doesn't, none of these things actually would match.
There is one thing before we close the book on this and move on to the Yuba 5. Radiological weapons, not likely. UFO, Yeti, no. There's no evidence of UFOs. There's a light on one of the final pictures that they developed, but it could have been really anything, that light. But I did read, Craig, did you read that there was military in the area, and this is actually documented, that were testing parachute mines. So you drop a mine and this mine explodes before it hits the ground. And those mines can cause those impact, no external
concussions,
but internal injuries. So maybe katabatic wind, maybe it was an accident that they then had to cover up. You don't want 9 students killed on a skiing trip because the military is testing parachute mines and not telling anybody.
No, I forgot about that one. Yeah, I mean, that could explain, like you said, that can, where we found like those ones would be in a car accident. It's like one of those things could have gone off near them, and that's what caused those injuries. And that's, and like the skull fracture stuff could have been from a fall. Yeah. And that's what would combine those two.
But what's weird is, though, those 4 bodies with those impacts were the furthest away. They were a mile away almost from the tent. It still doesn't explain because I'm not, it would be absurd to say katabatic wind wakes them up, disorients them. They cut their way out of the tent, but suddenly get calm, march their way almost a mile away, and then get hit with a parachute mine. That's absurd. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I mean, because it would be one of those, you got the katabatic winds coming through, everybody's on alert, and all of a sudden they hear like a loud, concussion bomb. Think Star Wars, that, it is like, you're not sure what it is. But one, it doesn't explain the cutting themselves out of the tent, other than just like maybe they're paranoid and they tried to get out, and then they got oriented themselves. And then, but the same group, and then I guess the group, as they go, the ones that survived, then another mine maybe came down, and then that's what got those people later on. I mean, that's possible. Yeah. But that's the closest I am, like King was talking about it. That's the closest I'm getting to like the military side, because I just, there's nothing that really explains, like if this was all, some military tech that they were testing on these, these kids, because it doesn't, there's it'll explain one piece, but it doesn't explain the other piece. I mean, there's nothing that's like one fits all.
And that is a truly, truly sinister mystery that lives up to its name. Last thing I want to say is, because there's some ideas about the remoteness of the area. Since that event happened, there have been more than 100 expeditions to that area. There have been 0 avalanches, and no one has ever found the conditions for an avalanche while they were there. So really interesting. But let's move on.
Do we want to talk about the orbs real quick? Do we want to address that?
Oh, you can if you want to, sure.
I just didn't know if, because there was some people that were about that same time, they reported seeing some orange orbs in the sky.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the ones that's tied into the aliens. I'm the same thing. Okay, we know that there was military facilities somewhere close by. This could have been a lot of things. This could have been military flare. This could have been a lot of things that would explain the orange orbs. I'm not there's nothing around that would explain like UFO activity, like why there would be a UFO activity around this thing. It's just because there's nothing else that, there's not like cattle mutilation, like these hikers wasn't mutilated by aliens, and that's why we found them kind of with eyes. None of these things stack right. I mean, it's just, we don't know, other than some people reported seeing orange orbs in the sky.
Right.
And if you've been in snow before, a single light can look like a glowing, thing. So it'd be real easy to have something that could come off as an orb.
Right.
I sound like Blue Beam.
My notes. Thank you.
Sound like Blue Book.
Yeah.
Sound like Blue Book right now. It was a light caused by the snow and stuff. Yeah, it's nothing.
That could very well be that's exactly what it was.
Exactly.
So the second half of the show is what is called the American Dyatlov Pass, and this is why we paired them, and really only called that because a group of people perished in snow conditions in a mountain. There really are no other overlaps, so it's a little sketchy to call it the So the Yuba County 5 is 1978. It's the winter of 1978. And it's 5 guys. It's Gary Mathias, it's Jack Madruda, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Ted Weir. Much easier to pronounce those names.
Yes.
Ted's is a little difficult. I went out and made sure to get that right. Weiher, but it's Weir. Here's, I guess, the interesting thing, the compelling thing out of the gates with this. All but Sterling, and Sterling has been grouped with everyone else, but I watched something very in-depth looking at just the 5 guys' lives. So great amount of detail. Sterling did not have any mental or psychiatric disabilities, whereas the others did. All of them lived with their parents for one reason or another. Gary had, he was an Army vet. So I guess he was sort of the problem child. It's interesting that he's the one that hasn't turned up. Army vet with a history of drug use, psychiatric issues, including schizophrenia, violent psychotic episodes that put him in the VA hospital several times. But he was on some medications where his doctor was calling him a sterling success case. So he has this history.
Oh, somebody was asking if it was real coffee, and I said yes. It's
promo.
No, well, they should. They should. I drink enough of this stuff.
They should. I know. There you go. So they decide, hey, let's take this drive up to Chico. Let's go to Cal State and watch a basketball game, because tomorrow we're going to play in a basketball tournament. So some of them have laid out their uniforms. Hey, we're going to take this drive up. It's 50 miles. We're going to go an hour. We're going to watch the basketball game. We're going to come back, and then we're going to go play basketball and kick some ass tomorrow. That's the setup. With these guys, 3 of whom have varying levels of mental disabilities, intellectual abilities, and Gary, who is now medicated and is kind of okay to be out amongst the people. His schizophrenia is under control. So this is February 24th of 1978, and they attend the basketball game at Cal State University, Chico, 50 miles from home. And they
Remember
all
that
pile,
part, everybody.
Yes. They all, and it's almost a straight shot. It's almost due north. So you go north probably, if I remember the map correctly, you go north probably about 40 miles, and you hang a bit of a left, and it takes you right to Cal State. Not a
Right into it, yep.
not a difficult drive. And they're in Madruga's turquoise white 1969 Mercury Montego. Good looking car. Good for Madruga that he's got this car. So they watch the basketball game. It plays out. There's this rumor, Craig, that I heard from one source and only one source that Gary Mathias gets into a scuffle with some dudes because they're making fun of Bill Sterling.
Yeah, I heard that. I wasn't able to find anything to really back that up. It was the same one. It was the same one like the claim of the country store owners about the payphone thing.
Yeah,
I was never able to find. Yeah, I was never able to find anything that corroborated that story either. It sounds like the ones where whenever you put out a missing persons report, all of a sudden somebody wants to get their name in the news, and they're like, "Yeah, I saw that woman going by. She walked past my house," just so you can have the news come and interview you. And there's no way to actually corroborate that piece of evidence.
No, so the couple of reports, just make it kind of sticky. So they do know that just before 10 p.m., they buy some snacks in a store in Chico. And those snacks were eaten on the drive because they found the empty wrappers and all of that kind of stuff. So, we go up to the basketball game. We got another drive to go. We're a little hyped up from the action. We want a little food, a little fuel. So they do those things. Problem is, the next day they don't arrive in Yuba City. They should have been home. They should have been home that night. 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
They should have been home by 11.
It's not that far of a drive.
No. So their parents, especially under the conditions of them having different intellectual disabilities, mental disabilities, they report them missing. On February 27th, their car is found. The empty food wrappers are in it. It's on a remote mountain dirt road at 4,400 foot elevation of Plumas National Forest, and they're above the snow line. They're 70 miles from Chico to the east, to the southeast, and then hook up a little from Chico. It is not on the way home. There's no reason to turn off there. So that becomes a big. Now, I will say, Craig, they took this Montego up this. When I lived in Maine, one day we were in like my Geo Prism and it was nighttime. It was like, hey, let's take a drive up the logging road. It's extremely disorienting. It's very, very hard on the undercarriage of the car. You don't have enough lights on your car to there's you're in a tree canopy. We thought, let's get above the tree line and take a look at the stars. And at one point we hooked a K-turn and we came back down. So I can't imagine these guys going through the snow up into the snow line and doing this thing. So it is odd. Now Madruga, who was driving, had been to this area before where the car was found and he hated it. His dad took him fishing there. He didn't like it. He didn't like fishing. Madruga didn't like the woods. I think one of the other guys was not particularly fond of the woods. His dad used to make trips up there all the time, and Madruga would say, I am not going with you. So that's kind of bizarre. What is in that direction is a town called Forbes-town. And Gary Mathias liked to smoke some weed. It was probably therapeutic for him with some of his problems, and he had some buds out that way. Now who had some weed, and maybe he said to his buds, let's just go to Forbes-town and score some weed. Were you familiar with that?
That's where
take it
from what I've researched, this is where it kind of deviates. Like I said, there's two things that they either went this way because the conditions on the regular one weren't that they didn't like them, and so they're like, well, hey, I know a way to go, and so they went this way, and they ended up kind of ending up in going towards this direction. Or like what you just said, that's one of those like, hey guys, real quick, hey, can we just, I know I've got a buddy over here, can I score something here? And then this kind of branches into, was this what befell these kids? Was because they made this deviation and they went here, and then somebody in that community was the one that did something to these guys,
right?
And that's where I said this is where it deviates on those,
right? And the common denominator in these weird little stories, like, did they go off to Forbes-town Did they get into an altercation at Chico State? Which, let's put the Chico State to bed one. You don't stop for snacks if some dudes are looking to kick your ass and they're following you. You don't go like, you just go home and you try to get away from these dudes, right? So very strange thing. So this red pickup truck starts to come in. So they find the car on this road and it's in the snow. But 4 to 5 men, these guys were healthy. They were athletes. They were basketball players. They could have easily moved the car. So abandoning the car is a little odd. Car had plenty of gas. It was also mechanically sound because the police hotwired it to test it. The keys were missing. They were later found in Madruga's chest pocket. And the driver's window was down. That is a bit of a bizarreness.
Yeah.
Cold weather, snow weather, at night. They get out of the car for whatever reason. Madruga takes the keys, but he leaves his window down. A little bizarre. He loved this car, his 69 Mercury Montego. And to leave the window down under those conditions, or that somebody would get into it, or an animal could crawl into it, anything could happen to it, could get snowed on. That's a little weird.
Well, and just like,
thing,
go ahead. No, I'll let you finish this part.
No. One last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you. No damage or mud on the underside, despite a sedan with a low muffler and a terrible road. And like I said, my GeoPrism, you could just hear that crap hitting, the underside of my car, and bop and boom, and the shocks didn't like it. That's a little bizarre. That they went up this dirt mountain road, which was in terrible shape, full of potholes and all other kinds of crazy things, and no damage to the underside or mud or anything. And that I can't explain.
Yeah, that's part of the thing, because like what I was going to interject right there is one of the guys, Ted, I think it's Ted Weir is how you say his last name.
Yes, Weir.
Yeah. So he's one, for anybody who's watched like The Big Bang Theory, like Sheldon Cooper, where he's that meticulous, like you have to have things in order. He's what these guys would be, what we consider now is the autism spectrum. They're called development disabilities, but like Ted Weir, he was on the severe side of this, because there was even a thing when he was there, he wouldn't get out of bed during a house fire because he wanted to get enough sleep for work the following day.
Right.
So this is one of those guys. So you have him in the car with you. Do you think he is not going to freak out if you deviate from the plan?
Right.
If you suddenly, if some, like one of the things Madru was like, hey, let's just go over here. He's gonna be like, no, we have he's gonna be steady. So this isn't going to be something that is going to sit well with this individual in particular.
Right.
And so I said, I don't know if I buy the planned deviation side because of this guy. I think that's part of it. I think something happened to where it was something that they had to do.
Yeah.
That there was something in the road. There's something, and they deviated, and that's the way they think. So that I said, I'm not on the side that they just on a whim. Hey, let's joyride. They go, because these guys were dead steadfast in what they love to do. So for them to not go to this basketball game, something happened.
Yeah, which I think it was a tournament. So it was a big game. It wasn't just an everyday game. And I didn't find any evidence, Craig, that Gary Mathias was like the leader of the group or was able to bully them. They were pals. They were 5 pals. He was the youngest.
No. I'll get to that part because we're coming up to it.
Yeah, almost the youngest. So Hewitt was 24. Mathias was 25, Madruga was 30, Sterling was 29, and Weir was 32. So they were contemporaries. They were buds.
Yep.
So, okay, so there is this guy with, again, these friggin' complicators, like these things aren't complicated enough. There's this man named Joseph Shones, and he spends the night of February 24th, 25th, near to where the Montego is found. The story goes that he was going to check the snowpack because his family was going to go up and ski near his cabin. And he gets chest pains, and he pulls over on the side of the road. The chest pains get so bad that he defecates next to his car, which the police confirmed. He's in severe amount of pain. In the middle of the night, he says, and he may have been hallucinating because of the pain, he also says, he saw a group of people get out of a car. Now, his story changes all the time. So we can almost throw this out, except it's part of the mystery. It is a mystery itself. What the hell happened with this guy?
Yes.
There were 12 people that supposedly get out of this car, and there's a woman holding a baby. And he calls for help because he has these severe chest pains. And he says that they immediately go silent. They shut off their headlights. Later, he sees flashlights. He calls out, and the flashlights are turned off. Tanya and I are finishing up the 3rd season of Twin Peaks. This sounds like some real Twin Peaks shit right here.
Oh, yeah.
With 12 people getting out of a car, and one is a baby, and he's crying out, and suddenly they go silent. They're shutting all their lights off. He also says, and again, this is this red pickup again, which shows up 3 times. It may have been a red pickup 20 feet behind him, but by this time he really was delirious. He also didn't want to cop to the fact that he ran out of gas. So when they went to see the car, in opposition to the Montego, his car was out of gas. All right, so the guy was driving up. Also, too, it's intimated that he had a drinking problem. He walks 8 miles to the lodge. Now, Craig, I've heard that he goes to the hospital the next day, and they confirm he had a mild heart attack. I hope if I ever have a mild heart attack, I can walk 8 miles in winter to a ski.
Oh God, I know. That's like I hoped I got my heart's that good. I'm having a heart. Yeah, I can sit there and do this massive winter hike.
Yeah. My log saw something that day. Yeah.
I don't know. It's what are those? Because I mean, I think we could probably, as we're getting here, we should probably get into some of the theories. That's one of the things that the theory is that Gary is the killer. One of the theories is that he's a killer, and that's why he's not been found, is that he's gone. But the thing is, because the mystery is that Ted Weir being found in the trailer wrapped up.
Yeah, under 8 blankets. Sheets, 8 sheets, including over his head.
Yeah, and so it's one of those, and with all of them, because I think it's Jackie Hute, I think it's Hute. I think is how you say it. He was the one that was basically, he had a speech impediment. He was probably the one would be the closest to what the term that we're not able to say anywhere, mentally retarded.
Right, Jack Hute.
Yep. Yeah, So he's probably the closest thing to, at that time would have been considered the mentally retarded. He's not able, even though he was still functional in some aspects. So there's the thought that these guys, that something happened, like after they deviated and something happened to them, and something happened to Ted, and they panicked, but they didn't want to leave it, so they wrapped him up like they were taking care of him. But then something else happened to the other 3, at the same time, and that's where the mystery is. And they think that Gary had something to do with it. That's why you didn't find him near those other 4.
Right.
It's because he was involved in it. Somebody like a buddy. He's like, he had something to do with, like I said, something happened. I've even heard one of the extreme ones was a Zodiac killer. You had I was going, they had, because everybody wants to tie to these things, but I'm like, there's no evidence that they were tortured or actually, brutally killed.
No, and there were no letters claiming responsibility. So that, Zodiac claimed everything and wrote those letters. So, just to finish up with Joseph Shones, there's a couple of interesting things. The guy who took him home from the lodge said he was ornery, he was ungrateful, he was complaining about things, and he said that he went off the road from the tailgater. And then within a couple days, the police talked to him, because as they were coming down the mountain from the lodge, taking him home, they did see the Montego, which is all kind of weird. Other thing, too, Joseph Shone, there's a rumor locally that he was also involved in the marijuana trade, and he had started growing his own plants, and somebody shut him down and robbed him. Because I write mystery novels and crap like that, you could go out on the limb and go, Shone was meeting with Matthias really for the drugs, or there was this red pickup involved, but none of it makes any sense, nor does what happened on March 3rd. where a store worker and a manager in Brownsville, which is about 30 miles from where the car was abandoned, tell police that 4 of the men, and I don't recall which one was missing. 4 of the men were in a red pickup truck at their store, and that Hewitt and Sterling were using a payphone outside. Problem is, Craig, you alluded to severe mental disability. For Hewitt, he despised the phone. He didn't understand how it worked. He didn't trust it. So I think the store worker and the manager in Brownsville were after the reward money that had been posted.
And that's one of the things. A lot of these things where they said, people have been seeing it, it's like that. It's basically they're trying to collect. Yeah, and that's because it's one of those. That's other thing. It's like Jack. It was like he. Most of these guys, like I said, they weren't incapable of doing things. It's one of those things they couldn't live on. They weren't living on their own at that time. Families would take care of them. They all had jobs. They were able to. I think Jack Hewitt was able. He knew how to drive a car. They knew how to do these things. It's just out of the ones, he's been the one that's usually the most considered to be the most mentally handicapped. But that's the thing, is that they're trying to, like, the theory is just, it's like that one that that they followed, they filed the cleared snow tank and they went through these things, but it's just, there's one of those things. The thing that they can't figure out is why they died. Why these 4 succumbed to something, but Gary didn't. They're together. So what was it that allowed him to survive and not them? And that's why a lot of people keep pointing towards him as the one that perpetrated it, because, like you said, he was schizophrenic,
which means you pull up your meds. So where the hell did he go? I don't buy that.
Yeah, he went off on his meds, or maybe he went and they just haven't found him yet because he wandered off and he's somewhere even further away and they just haven't discovered the body yet. But that's the thing, is there's a chance that he may have been the one that. But as far as I know, like with Weir, I'm trying to remember. I don't think that they didn't really show any signs of foul play, did they, on that body?
No, that's what's weird. So it took 3 months to find these guys after they were missing. 3 months. They found Ted Weir on June 4th in a Forest Service trailer, a well-stocked one, which I'll get into. It was 19 miles from the car. That's a pretty good walk, 19 miles, especially when there's a lodge 8 miles away. It's weird. You know what I mean? Because that they went further up into, but there is a theory about that. A group of motorcyclists come to the Forest Service trailer and they notice that the window is broken. Now, these guys might have broken in the window to try to get access. Okay, cool. Makes sense. A snowcat had cleared the roof of the Forest Service trailer a day before they went missing. Maybe they followed those tracks, and that's why they headed for the Forest Service trailer rather than for the lodge, which was 8 miles back down the road. Weir died of starvation and exposure. About 3 months after. So this is horrible. That Weir survived 3 months, probably scared out of his mind, nuts. And this is based on how long his beard was. Probably lasted about 3 months. Now, here's the confounding thing. In the Forest Service trailer was food enough for 5 men for a year. They were sea rations. And some of the cans were open and they were empty. And that's why I think it was Madruga and Matthias were both in the Army.
Yeah, they were both military.
Yeah, some researchers talk about the sea ration can opener. That's like really
if you ever use it, it has that little hook and you have to sit here. Yeah. You have to do this motion, to pop it open and just go through to get into it. And so somebody that wasn't technical thing, it's like, it's not something that's easy to do because it folds in half. Yep. And so you fold it open and you have to sit here and just do this rocking and puncturing it. It's not easy to do.
No. So some of the cans were emptied, but there was food for 5 men for a year. And this guy dies of starvation in the trailer. Plus there's like novels, there's newspaper, and there's materials to build a fire. But also too, in a nearby shed, there's a butane tank to actually heat the trailer.
Yeah. And that's
So these guys, yeah.
And that's the thing is too. One of the they've got supply. So I mean, all these guys could have holed up into this location, which the one. This would be the one because I'm trying to remember how the other three. How close in proximity were they to this trailer?
11 miles.
Okay, so what so pretty much like the theory I came up with is they got separated.
Mm-hmm.
He found the trailer, but because, like I said, it's one of those things. He probably didn't know how to operate some of this, some of this stuff, do these things,
Right.
and so he was trying to survive. He was kind of doing his best, but like they talk about that, it was so badly frostbitten that it actually started to rot. And so he would have been in so much pain. But the thing that doesn't make any sense, and that's where kind of maybe the bikers found, and that's why they covered him up. But how did he cover himself up in all these blankets?
No, he couldn't have. Yeah, they were sheets, and he couldn't have. If he was dying of exposure and starvation, he and really there should be exposure if he was in the Forest Service trailer, even with the broken window. So yeah, his body is wrapped in 8 sheets on the bed, including his head. His shoes are missing. His feet are frostbitten, nearly gangrenous. So this was seared.
He would have been in a lot of pain.
His wallet, his ring, and his necklace are on the table, along with a gold watch with a missing crystal that wasn't his. And people go, "Oh, the watch," but that could have been a forest ranger's, could have been someone else who had come to the trailer at some point, and they took the crystal out. Who the hell knows why? So the next day, they find Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling along the road leading to the trailer. They're almost halfway between the car and the trailer. Madruga is partly consumed by animals. Sterling is only bones. They are managed to do an autopsy on Madruga, and it's hypothermia. So, okay, causes of death here pretty straightforward. 2 days after that, Jack Hewitt is found, ironically, Craig, by his father, who had joined a search party. They found his backbone, and they found his skull 300 feet away from the backbone. So obviously, animals.
Yeah, that's right. Because one of the theories was like the fellow people covered him up before they leaving. Well, the problem is the trailer doesn't give that evidence that those guys were even there, because there's no matches were used, no fire had been lit. So the fact that he had lived in this place without heat is the mystery. Is how did he survive this long without heat? Because even in that stuff with that timber,
with a shed with a butane tank that would heat the trailer, and enough food for 5 men for. So here's the odd thing, because I think Matthias was with. It seems to me that Matthias was with Weir at least part of the time, and here's why: the sea rations were opened, and also Weir's shoes were missing, and Gary Matthias's shoes were found sitting outside the trailer. So he probably switched shoes.
And that's kind of one of the things too, where it leads to where the people are thinking he might have been, because he may have been the one that was there, and he, came back, that's the big mystery, is like, what, and I think that's why so many people are still pointing the fingers at this is the guy. I mean, he wigged out, but the one of those things is, how did we because of the other guys being found, there's no real, I don't think there would be no way to tell of like strangulation or anything like that, because all the soft tissue's gone.
Especially the 2 guys that were devoured by,
and so
devoured.
Most likely it's like, if he was a killer, he would have been, Weir would have died from natural causes. So he could have just waited that out, and just found it. He killed the other 2 guys, and he periodically would come check on the guy, like maybe feed him something, give him something to drink, and that's how he survived. And over the time, and that's where the serial killer type thing comes, like those theories come into play. But it's just one of those things. There's also just, what's the motive? They were all friends. Why all of a sudden? And that's one of the things that one of the theories I kept coming across was that they think without the medication, he was wigging out.
Yeah.
And that's why he ended up often his buddies. But that's the thing. It's like, he was right there. You may have gone looking for the rest of the group, traded shoes that were dry. Yeah, and that's very true. That's one of the things. It's like there's no hard evidence that he killed his friends, but it's one of those mysteries. Where is he?
Yeah. And very, very odd, 11 miles away, and it took them 4 months to find them, or the one was 2 miles away from the trailer. So
that's a lot of land to search.
Yeah.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah. I think, off the meds, away from home, scared, cold. Things started to deteriorate. I don't have an explanation except to say I really don't think Gary Mathias killed his 4 friends. I really don't.
Yeah, there's not really
a drug deal gone wrong. That might have been part of it. Because of this red pickup truck, the area was heavy into, marijuana grow.
They could have
been the catalyst for the divergence.
They killed the two guys. Or should say they killed the 3. Like I said, and he was on the run.
Yeah,
and he was coming. And it's like they didn't know about his buddy who was in the trailer, and he was coming back to check. So I mean, that is a theory: is that he was he was constantly just trying to avoid these guys because they were searching for him, and he was just trying to keep track of his buddy who might have been injured, put him in the trailer, and like I said, and kept checking on him, and he ended up succumbing. Like I said, he could be in some other area, succumbed to the thing, and that could have been the thing, because like I said, he would have been military, he would have had some basic survival things. So I mean, that is a possibility, is that's why, it was something that happened, drug deal, guys are coming after him. But I don't know. It's a fantastic mystery. I mean, like I said,
they are unsettling, really unsettling, because now we'll never know. Years and years and years have gone by. I did watch one guy who talked to some people from their town and from Forbstown, and there are some things that nobody wants to talk about because they'll maybe jeopardize some people. There were some secrets, there were some things going on, so we'll see. But anyhow, Craig, you want to tell? So I had a question last week. Someone came looking for you. So Craig is with me every other week. Yes. So he'll be back in 2 weeks. I do solo shows, sometimes with guests, sometimes by myself. In the intervening weeks,
I may drop in every now and then. We'll see.
Yeah, who knows? It's always open. Do you want to tell them what the next 4 episodes? So it takes place over the next 2 months.
Yes, tell them what the next we're gonna kind of it's kind of a it's a I don't know what do you call a 4? It's not a trilogy. What do you
a quadrilogy? I call it quadrilogy.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking. They all kind of feel. They all have connections in the way that they work. We're going to start with Ruby Ridge, and then it's going to go to Waco siege, and then we're going to be talking about the Vegas shooting, and then I think that's what you want, right?
Well,
Vegas
prior
shooting,
to that,
and then
Vegas shooting.
Then we're going to do the Bundy standoffs.
Yeah, then we'll finish with the Las Vegas shooting.
With the Vegas shooting will be the last one. So the Bundy standoffs, we're going to take care. We're going to tackle both. We're going to talk about the original one that happened in Nevada with standoff with over the cattle, and then we're going to talk about the one that happened in Southern Oregon.
Yeah,
that ended up with being shot. Yeah, the guy, his name's failing me right now, but yeah, he ended up being, and a lot of these had the same things, is FBI snipers were involved in 3 of the, I think they were involved in the Waco one too, but I know for sure in the Ruby Ridge and the Bundy standoffs, they were involved. And potentially Las Vegas.
Yeah. I'm so glad we're going to visit that Las Vegas shooting, because it came up. It was nuts. The spray pattern of the cartridges from the rifle don't make sense.
It's going to be these are going to be some great. And yeah, so look for set those things for sure for the next 4 episodes. We're going to tackle some ones. I mean, everybody should know about Ruby. I've heard of Ruby Ridge in Waco, but you may not know some of the details because if you've never watched it and you actually start looking into it, these things are actually really shocking. You can see the corruption in the U.S. government and the things that are happened, especially like with Waco. There was no reason for a kill order to be issued that would cause the death of all these people because there's nothing, there was nothing that was pressing that you had to, bulldoze and cause all these people to kill, because it looks like, and we'll get into these things with the shows, and they're really good. They're really, and it's full hours for each one. I mean, Ruby Ridge is going to be one that we're going to be hard pressed to get through all the information in the hour 15. I mean, that's going to be,
if we have to make it a 2-parter, let's,
because it's everything from, Ruby Ridge. Yeah. Cause that was the first one that happened in 1992. Waco was 1993.
Right.
So my sophomore year, Ruby Ridge happened. My junior year, Waco happened.
Wow. Yeah, I was already out of college and in the world then.
I'm a youngin', 48.
55. If you think, just let me know, because if we need to do Ruby as a 2-parter, let's plan on that.
I think we can get it. It's just one of those. It's like, just because it's, as we get in, thanks, Joe. Yeah, as we get into the, as we get into the stuff, you'll just see it, because it touches on everything. It touches everything from government intentionally setting up a private individual just for the point of it's what we're dealing with now. You create the problem so that way you could come in with a solution, and it's you could see this isn't a new thing. This started even back then, and it was a federal government creating the problem that they then cracked down on.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. The Vegas shooting is crazy. It's like, I'll leave you. That's my final point. When we get to that show, how can you have something major like this in a Vegas casino and there's not even a photo?
Yeah.
There's cameras everywhere on the strip. Festival. Everywhere. Yeah. You can watch live camera. You can see all this stuff. There's cameras everywhere in a casino. We don't have a single photo of this man bringing anything in from the outside to the elevators. Not a single photo.
Supposedly.
Yeah, and if he has that many guns and ammo, we're going to see rack after rack on a luggage cart wheeling in. We don't have a single photo. Yeah, that's what I said. How did he get all this? Prepare. Like I said, everybody take your notes, bring your questions. We're gonna have some great ones, because there's a lot of good stuff on there. So
and if we need 90 minutes, we'll take 90 minutes if you all stay with us. So there you go.
Radio. Listen to this show rebroadcast on Wednesdays at, if I'm not mistaken, 10 p.m. right?
Eastern Standard Time. That's right.
Radio. Ron told me, go to Mixler.com, set up your account right there so you can follow this fine programming into the outer realms on there, and listen. You can listen to his shows as well as the Sinister Mysteries.
That's right. And in 2 weeks, number 40. Ruby Ridge. Awesome. Yeah, so we're doing a 90-minute show for our 40th episode. Seems all well and good.
Yeah, I think we can pull it off.
Be well.
Good night.